everybody. We're going to be starting our webinar very shortly, just letting everybody get settled in.
Hi, everyone.
Welcome, everybody.
Hello.
I don't know about you guys, but I still find it quite surreal that I can't see the people I'm saying hello to.
Yeah.
But fortunately, can still see you guys.
Just
and
out
have a
there in the universe.
Yeah.
I always think of, oh, you wouldn't have had Romper Room where you're from, Jacqueline, in the UK, or Dee in the States. It was a Canadian children's show, or it was called the Romper Room, and it was this. Hi, Anne just said hello, hello.
Hi.
It was like a kindergarten class almost, and it was this teacher, and she would look into this mirror and she would say people's names, like, and I'm saying hello to Jesse, to Becky, to Matthew, and you just hope she would say your name. Yeah, this is one of those things. All right, I think we're ready to get started. So welcome, everybody. I'm gonna just say welcome, bonjour, bonjour, wherever you're dialing in from. We just wish you a warm welcome. And I always like to first acknowledge that all of us, wherever we're gathered in North America, are living on, working on ancestral lands that are still inhabited by the diverse and vibrant Native communities that live here today. We respect these treaties that were made on these lands and dedicate ourselves to moving forward in partnership with Indigenous communities in the spirit of reconciliation and collaboration. Miigwech. So good morning, welcome everybody. I'm so excited because we're actually spanning 3 countries today with this presentation. We're in Canada, of course, I'm your favorite Canadian. And then we have Dee in the States we're going to be introducing today to everybody, which is exciting. And then one of my favorite people in the whole world, Jacqueline, all the way from the UK. So you are all involved in this very diverse group of people today. So exciting. So what we're going to talk about today is, well, we're going to meet everybody. Then we're going to go through why organizational transformation is so important. We talk about change a lot and change management, but really for change to be sustainable, it has to be a transformation. We're going to talk about the barriers. Why don't we see more transformation when we're trying to make change? And then we're going to talk about the good news. So how do we create that environment of growth that supports the transformation that we're seeking? And then we have a pretty awesome toolkit for you today, which we'll be able to send out after. I'll quickly introduce myself. I am Christy Cordingley. My background has been in occupational health and safety and human resources. I like to say that I specialize more in the psychological safety and behavior-based safety. But I've also been an executive leader, and I do all sorts of wonderful things because I like to stay busy. It's funny, you guys, I was at a networking event the other night, and someone who knows me quite well heard me speaking to somebody else about one of my projects. And she's like, you do that too? I'm like, oh, yeah. She's like, do you sleep? I'm like, sometimes. But that's the thing, when you're excited, it's hard to put it down, right? So that's how I roll. Very excited you guys are here today. So Miss Jacqueline, I would love for you, our beautiful managing director all the way from the UK who lives in Nottingham, a city that I love and have spent time in. Tell us a little bit about you.
What an introduction. I feel a little bit like, what do I add? And maybe don't add anything because it would take away from how you've just described me. Most definitely. But hi, everybody. Yes, I am bang in the centre of England. And I have a background in training and development. I've run my own businesses and managed teams. I am both a trained counsellor and a coach, and I'm passionate about supporting people to get the very best out of their working lives, and equally cultures in organisations, the environments that we work in. I'm really passionate about that. So it's brilliant to be here today.
Thank you. It's brilliant to have you. And then we have joining us today, so I guess this is like a debut for her. So we are continuing our global expansion. So as you know, we're in the UK, we launched South Africa recently. The Philippines will be coming on board, as well as the United States. So I would love to introduce our newest addition to the team of directors, and that is Dee. And I would love for you to share a little bit about you, Dee.
Hi, Christy. Thank you so much for having me. This is so exciting. So I am a personal empowerment coach. So I've been so for about 2 years. Before that, I was in learning and development, content creation, and I did a lot with community outreach. So this role is very important to me because I am able to partner with these lovely ladies you see and really hone in on my own mission of trauma-informed leadership and neuro-inclusive workplaces.
Yes, yes, thank you so much. And Dee is a sought after speaker, and actually this week she invited me to join her. We're doing a presentation on trauma-informed leadership with the US Air Force. How cool is that?
Wow.
I'm like, is this real? This is crazy. It's so exciting. It's such an honor and a privilege. So thank you, Dee, for being part of my life. I'm so happy that we met, and I'm so happy that you're here, part of our Ignite Purpose family.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So we're going to get into why organizational transformation first. And I just want to preface, if you have any questions or want to add something to the conversation, please feel free to go to the Q&A. Even if you just have a comment, feel free to put it there. We're happy. We'll keep an eye on the chat. We'll answer any questions you have or add your thoughts and commentary, because really this webinar is not going to be a we teach or we go through. We are going to have slides, but we're going to have more of a conversation. And I'm going to pick the brains of these beautiful, smart creatures on this webinar with me. I do want to start though with a little bit about who we are, because organizational transformation is really the reason we all are part of Ignite Purpose. That's why Ignite Purpose exists to begin with. Our CEO, Christy Foxwell, when she worked as an executive in human resources, learning development, and also sales, she would often organize training, webinars, resources, coaching, all sorts of things for her people, and would notice that people would walk a little faster. Maybe they would be really excited after a workshop, maybe for a few days, maybe even a couple months, but it was a really good one. But eventually, because they would return to the same environment that they came from with nothing changing around them, they would quickly go back to old habits or to the way things were. So change just wasn't sustainable. And it wasn't that companies were doing something wrong or deliberate. Sometimes it was just due to capacity, right? They just didn't have the resources to manage that change. They weren't sure how to fix the environment, or they didn't really understand the concept of leadership begins within. How do we become better leaders so that we can lead others well? We can all be better together. So that was why she created Ignite Purpose, was to walk with organizations and show them how to make the most out of their investment in their people, how to create long-lasting transformation where things aren't just changed temporarily, where things actually, that growth that is inspired in those resources is now sustainable, because not only is that person thinking new things, but now there's a whole organization thinking different things, and they now have the resources and tools and capacity to be a better together team, if that makes sense. So I would love to talk to you guys really quickly. I mean, there's one sentence here, like transformation takes strategy, strategy takes the capacity to execute. And I would love to know what your thoughts are on the difference between change or transformation. So Jacqueline, would you like to go first?
Yeah, it's actually interesting that the final bullet point on there, that change is more minor. You know, it's something you mentioned there about the individuals versus actually the bigger picture. And you know, I know from experience we can spend money on, you know, courses and training. Actually, it's what happens after that. It's how the whole organization transforms after. And so that when I've been on that training, I come out into an environment that actually is set up for me to embed that training into what I'm doing. So those changes, as you rightly said, take time. They take bigger picture. They take that alignment of everybody being, you know, in the same path, really, for me. So that's the difference. Change is just a, you know, change happens, but actually it's not long lasting. It might be for some. I will just say that it's not everybody, but I think bigger picture, transformation is everyone. It's all the processes that we're looking at in that sense. What about yourself, Dee?
Yeah, so that's a great answer. So what I was thinking is change is something that we can do on an individual level, and it's something that we can do daily. So doing minor changes to create habits, like those are the little changes that lead up to the larger transformation. So without the little changes, can we really have a large transformation? I'd argue that we probably can't.
No.
No, I love that. And I think that's really true. There's a book I read called The Plateau Effect, and it talks exactly about that. And sometimes when we want to see big results, we think it always takes big, massive action. But really, it's in those small daily things. If you change one small thing that you do daily, it will start to create a momentum and a movement. We've seen that in our own businesses, right? Where you just get into one little habit that you think is just so simple, and all of a sudden things start to move forward. It's almost sometimes so simple that we forget to keep doing it. We're like, oh, that was the secret ingredient for me getting to where I am now. Why did I stop doing that? Because it's just so simple. But we have to give people ideas on how to create those changes, and we have to make those changes simple for them as well. So if you're going to have a change, so I'll give a safety example. So this is a very tiny example of behavior and creating an environment of transformation. So we had a company once, so this is a safety thing. So we had these technicians that would have to go out into this yard, which had a lot of traffic. So they had to wear high visibility gear around the trucks and that type of thing. And when we gave them their high visibility gear, the only place to store it for them cleanly was in their locker, which meant that in order for them to just leave the shop to go do what they needed to do, they would have to go all the way back to the locker and go back out. Who's going to do that? Even though it's the right thing to do, even though it's a policy, and we're saying, no, this is the change we made, you have to do this. It's not going to happen because it's just not convenient. It doesn't make it easy. They actually have to go out of their way and think about applying that little change every single day. We ended up purchasing coveralls that had some high visibility stuff built into them. So those are the types of things when we talk about transformation. That's on a very, very small scale, but just to give an example of how those little minor practices give us clues onto how we can make change stick, right?
And interesting, that's when you begin to see something like that work, and actually that's when the innovation comes. That's when people start to notice, where else is it possible to do something? Where else are we spending time and energy that isn't producing the best results? How do we do that? So yeah, it's the effect of that that makes a big difference.
Yes, thank you for letting me share that. There's also some really compelling data nowadays about why organizational transformation is so critical and how we need to be preserving the human capital. And I know people are not dollar signs, but they are generally the biggest investment we make. Payroll is usually half of our operating costs. Our entire business runs on people. So we need to be able to get them on board to not only have success at their job, but be successful as people. So they want to stay, that they want to feel cared about, that we're actually listening to them. It's really interesting, this World Economic report about, there was one quote in there that I really, really loved, and it was that businesses are finding retaining people more challenging than obtaining capital and funding. So it's not even that people are like, when they think about the hard part of starting a business, it used to be that people would be like, where am I going to get all the funding for this? And then now it's switched to, where am I going to find the right people for this? And that's what we're seeing. We're seeing gaps because 81% of organizations are considering investing in learning and training to address those challenges of retention and creating environments where growth mindset is applicable, critical thinking is applicable. We're seeing about a 59% of organizations reporting skills gap in the workforce. And I would venture to say that those skills gaps are probably related to something that we still refer to, I think, not quite accurately as soft skills, but it is those communication skills, those interpersonal skills, those leadership skills is really where we're seeing the gaps, because automation and technology is filling in a lot of the labor type skills. And then we're seeing 35% of organizations specifically see a gap in organizational leadership. So now you guys thinking about some of your experience, because you've worked with organizations, you've managed companies before and still do. What do you think are some of the reasons we're seeing this today, that we're seeing this gap, that people just can't seem to shift, that they're struggling with gaps, that they're struggling with finding talent, that they're struggling to get their people on the same path together?
Sure. So for the 37% of organizations with a skill gap in leadership, I feel strongly that that has to do with organizations finding people within their organizations that are good at one job. So when they're good at one job, then we want to promote them, which is fantastic. But then we promote them to a manager, we promote them to a leader, and we don't give them the skills that they need, such as, these trainings that we're talking about, leadership trainings about empathy and communication. We don't do that. We say, well, you were really good at this one job, so now be a manager for these people that are doing the same jobs that you're good at, which is fantastic, that, they recognize that, yes, this person could be more than maybe than they were in their old position. But if we do not give people the tools that they need to be successful in that position, then of course we're going to see skills gaps.
Mm-hmm. How about you, Jacqueline?
I would literally, that's exactly where I would have gone. I'd like to just share as well that anybody watching, if you get the opportunity to read the report that we've just shared, it is fascinating reading. It really is. And that line that you shared there, Chrissy, really struck me as well. That actually it is people, and people are at the heart of what we do. There's a fascinating bit in the report that talks about that. We thought AI and technology would be far more advanced in organizations, and they're not thinking now that it's going to be as big. People are at the core of what we do. And, it's like you said, Dee, that shift then when we get promoted, actually there's such an opportunity to support that person to develop further skills which are needed. We're also coming in and I know in the UK after the Great Resignation, things have slowed down now, but people are making different choices in the roles that they're looking for as well. So lots of kind of diversifying, and I think that's where a lot of the organizations, particularly because it's something like 803 organizations, as you can tell, I have read it a couple of times, that the report talks about, but over 11 million people in their workforces. So looking at these gaps that they're seeing, that's huge, generally, in that sense. And we are diversifying as a world, in the way that we work. New roles are being created. New technology is there, and we need people to be able to have those skills, and it's on an organization, isn't it, as such, to be able to do that and develop people.
Yes, absolutely. Actually, Anne Kramer, one of the webinar participants, just messaged saying, she says, being good at your job does not equate to having the ability to be a good leader. And I think that's absolutely true. If you look even at a sports analogy and you look at the top coaches in the leagues, they weren't the best players. It's a completely different skill set. It is possible, but it is a completely different skill set, often from the work that you do, to mastering the work that you do, to mastering leading other people. There's a whole new level that needs to be built there. Thank you for sharing that, Anne. That was awesome. And then, of course, the benefits are huge. So it's not even that we make our life easier, but we actually really get to the bottom of a bunch of things that can hold us back in business, like being flexible, being agile, having adaptability, understanding when we need to switch focuses, how to manage performance, how to get innovative and creative, how to retain people, sustainability, and succession planning, which are really, really important because we're seeing a mass exodus of retirees coming up soon. And often we forget to see that, you know what, we do need to be building leaders as people are already leading. There should always be a next level coming through. I like to say we should all pretend that we are going to win the lottery tomorrow. And if we do, who's going to be able to do what we do? Who's going to take our briefcase off our hands and be able to do that? And organizational transformation is always having that living movement of sustainability and succession planning. So I would love to ask you, I know Dee, you wanted to mention something about what Anne said as well. So I'd love for you to answer that. And then also maybe share some of the benefits you've seen.
Yeah, well, first of all, Anne, thank you so much for your comment, because that's exactly, I think, part of the reasons why organizations run into so many issues, is because they have all these, people with all these different type of talents, and they're not necessarily tapping into them or honing them by, by just supporting the person through training and development. So thank you for that, for sure. So I would like to, for the benefits of the transformation, I think that what's really key in here is the sustainability piece. The fact that we're not, so Ignite Purpose as a whole, these two beautiful ladies and myself on here, what we dedicate our careers to is the sustainability piece. We dedicate the transfer because we understand that to transform, you have to think about sustainability and what are the benefits of transforming. You get to keep your people, you get to have loyal people, you get to have people that believe in you as an organization, believe in your mission, and you have that a mission alignment. So we talk a lot about Hive culture, and with Hive culture, that's what it is. It's having everybody working towards one mission. Everybody knows their place. They know how they fit in. So those are some benefits of transformation is, knowing is your people knowing how to be the greatest champion for your business. What are your thoughts, Jacqueline?
I guess I'd echo exactly what you just said there with the sustainability, the succession planning as well. I think that as organizations are saying, that's the challenge. What happens next? Because there's such a diversity in skills now, and with technology coming on board, and equally the engagement and the retention, because you mentioned the word loyalty there. We are living in a time that is different now. I was about to go back in the day when my dad, I'm conscious of my language, my father, he was in a job at the time for life. That's now not exactly the same process. We know we're going into a new kind of time really with jobs. And we need to diversify. We need to kind of transform what's happening, and to have that adaptability that when things happen. I mean, Chrissy, even just coming back to something I know we've shared on a previous conversation, when COVID happened, when a business is being transformed, when actually, rightly said, it's aligned, you can deal better with, challenges when they come. In that time. So yeah, I think that for me, it's that adaptability, they're being able to deal with what comes is huge.
We have another comment here. Anne says, so change can be more reactive in the moment. Transformation is making changes consistently to ensure the organization remains successful. And I think that sums it up quite beautifully. Thank you, Anne. So we know that transformation is good. We want to. So why is it so hard? Well, it's interesting right now, we're seeing in real time some very public corporations going through transformation now. And it actually is a lesson of who's doing transformation well, who's struggling with transformation. But I mean, we're seeing it right now in real time, watching, you know, as Twitter morphs into this new company called X, change of leadership, change of hands, change of operations. And I'm not passing judgment on how they're doing things, but we could really learn a lot just from seeing how some of these are playing out. We've seen it in past with other companies too that have gone through, I guess I would almost call them different evolutions, if that makes sense. Like they've really evolved, and they did it. What's really interesting is that all of these people have done it on purpose, right? And you think about Google becoming the major search engine, right? Like it's a verb. It's now a household verb. That's how much they transform that industry. Is we didn't even say, oh, search engine, we say Google it. Whether we're using Google or not, we still say Google, right? So these are things where it has transformed so much that it has created. So when I would just love to know what your thoughts are. I don't even have a specific question. I see you guys like,
Well, I'll mention on the Google thing, just because Google is just like, I'm there. I'm always like, oh, you need an answer? Google it. Like, so I'm always like, you're welcome, Google, for helping you expand, because I use you all the time. But so seriously, one of their changes that they did that really we can still see the impact of it today was as part of their initiative of trying to grow and grow into an innovative and risk-taking culture in the early 2000s. They encouraged employees to take a 20% 20% of their time to just do innovation, just work on things that you want to work on something that is innovative and something that's going to bring us to the next level. And because of that, just that 20% time policy, which seems, like, oh, okay, yeah, we're going to give people 20% of time for them to do things. What's going to happen? What's going to happen is they're going to take ownership. They're going to take ownership and they're going to say, wow, like, what can I do with 20% of my time? How can I bring Google to the next level? And that's exactly what happens. So now, just from the transformation that happened in the 23 years of transformation, look where Google is now. And it's because they took time to listen to their employees. They took time for their employees to be innovative, and they gave them the space to do that. So for me, that speaks volumes.
I love that. Jacqueline?
Well, I'd like to add to what Dee said and yet come back to what Anne said as well. Because Anne, what a great comment. It really struck me about the bit about being reactive, because one of the things that we're going to offer at the end of this, isn't it, is the mental fitness assessment and, the debrief. And I love working in that field. And the whole difference between when we react to something and where that's actually coming from in our thinking, and that's very much more fear-based, and those emotions that are incredibly important but often don't end up getting us the greatest results, versus what you've just described, Dee, which is where if I'm working from a place where actually there's empathy, there's understanding, there's compassion, there's creativity and curiosity, I'm far more likely to foster great relationships that can make connections happen and build trust. Because your story, for me, when I listened to it, was about, initially, I just thought that's all about trust. That has taken that time to foster that listening, that understanding what's needed to actually give employees that opportunity then to go and to be creative. They've had to be in a place where, there was that understanding, that trust, that great feeling, that joy as such, the awe and wonder, which I love those words, but that feeling of wanting to go and explore, that doesn't happen when we're in fear.
No.
That's when we react.
Yes. That's why I love asking myself every once in a while. And I think it was Christina actually that taught me this, is if I'm unsure what to do or what to do next or where to go, to ask myself, what would I do if I wasn't afraid? What would I do if I wasn't afraid?
Yeah.
One of my favorite examples on here is Ford. Now, I'm not a Ford, I don't drive a Ford, I'm not a Ford person, but back in I think it was one of the major recessions when all the big car manufacturers in the US went for bailouts and that type of thing, Ford was the only one that did not take any government assistance. And that was because they knew that they needed to transform from within, because you can get bailouts, but how is that actually changing anything long term, right? Many of us know there's nothing we become more used to than a new amount of money, right? So it just loses its luster over time. But they were really smart, and they hired a leader that had really done transformation before. That was Alan Mulally. And when he came to Ford, he really watched how the leaders worked and how the company worked together. And so one of the first things he noticed was that one of their barriers to transformation was that they weren't even believing that their product was good enough for them. So when they picked him up on his first day of work and drove him to head office, and he went into the executive garage, there were Land Rovers and Mercedes and BMWs, and there was not one Ford. So what is that saying about your brand when you're not even using it yourself, right? And then when he got to the table to do meetings, even though profits were down, they were facing, mass layoffs and disruption. Every manager around the table said their department was going great. Everything was going great. And he's like, I don't understand how that's true. And he had to build trust. And he got to a point where he ended up just giving no color codes. He's like, you don't even have to tell me details yet. Just say green, I'm good. Yellow, I'm not sure. And red, I really need help. Just help me. And it was always green. It was always green. It was always green. And he kept pointing out, it can't be true. We can't fix what we don't know. I'm not blaming you if there's something wrong. We can solve this together as a team. And eventually, when the first person said that they were red, they had faced a stop sign and whatever production or whatever that they were doing, he celebrated that person. And soon enough, it was rainbows and real information was coming through. People were being honest and transparent, and the executive teams were coming together. And that's really one of the biggest challenges to transformation. And we're going to spend a little more time even on the next slide, just on that specifically, but just the leadership alignment that needs to come, that executives have to work as teams themselves. Sometimes we think we get to a level, oh, I don't have to be a team anymore. Now I'm the leader. You're still part of a leadership team. We are still always part of a team. And even like the Ford example, we're still a team even with our customers, right? Like once we start siloing and separating ourselves as different and start othering, it's very hard to go through change and transformation together. And that's where we talk about organizational silos, right? So Jacqueline, I'd love to know, why do you think, in your experience, why do you think people are so resistant to change? What are some of can we talk about, we're gonna have a new procedure, new policy, and people are like, oh, everything's gonna change, and we get scared rather than excited. Why does that happen?
Because we like stability and we very often like comfort. and learning something new throws us out of that comfort zone, and we can react in very different ways. I'm racking my brains. I cannot remember the name of a YouTube video that I've just watched, which is, I think it's called Where's My Cheese? I just scratch and sniff and he and haw. He and haw and hem or something like that it is. But it just blew my mind, because we're all actually, this is about awareness of who we are with change. When it talks about resistance to change, are we somebody that finds it uncomfortable, but ultimately not changing becomes more uncomfortable, So we begin to realize that we want to do something different. Or actually, you know, are we somebody that's like, no, I like the way that I've always done it. And I think that's really important, that, you know, it's, again, something that you guys have both said about, to be able to transform on a bigger picture, it does start with individuals. We all go through that, you know, so actually that awareness for each of us of, how do we feel about change? I am not going to sit here now and go, oh, I'm very open to change. I'm a heck. There have definitely been times when things have changed that I thought, oh, I think I like the old way better, thanks ever so much. But actually, I think this is where the alignment and the clear objectives and vision, what's the purpose of this? What's our objective for changing this? Once people understand the reason why, they're far more likely to want to come with you. Yeah. The next step is we talk about the how, because actually that again in itself, because if people don't understand either of those, it doesn't happen. You know, so it's an awareness of that. I've seen it so many times in, you know, in the work that I've done, where new products have been brought in or a new way of doing something, and it does I love this word. I won't claim it. I will claim it. A very lovely lady called Debbie, who you would use it all the time. Discombobulation. You know, and that discombobulated, it's like, oh, where am I going with this now? What do I do? And I was only this morning talking about how when we do something new, it can often feel like a little plug's being pulled out of our brain, and everything that we've known before is gone. So we fear not being knowledgeable. We fear, you know, not having that experience. And actually that's where, isn't it? Fear. It's that word. What if I wasn't afraid? What if actually I approached this with a beginner's mindset and thought, let's give it a go? So yeah.
Yes, and Anne says change is uncomfortable. Leaders can help to dispel fears if they have open conversation about what their fears are. And I think that's it. I think once we're at that level, it's not that we don't have fears. I think the more transparent we are and talk about our fears, the easier they are to dispel, and getting to the why. Okay, I am afraid, but this is why we're partaking on this particular transformation journey. And you know what, I was speaking to someone the other day, and they said, don't ever be afraid when dark, negative things come out into the realm of daytime, right? Where you're actually starting to see some of the ugly out there, whatever it is, right? The negative, the toxic, the hurtful stuff that's starting to come out. And people worry about it overwhelming, that it's too dark, it's too much, we're not going to get through this. She said the only reason it comes out is because we can shine a light on it, because you can't fix it if it's hidden in the shadows. So once it comes out, this is actually good, even though it's scary. And it's like, wow, that's a bigger issue than I thought it was. You now have the opportunity to spread some light around the situation, which is really great. How about you, Dee?
Right. Yeah. Well, I'm loving this conversation because I really think that humans are resistant to change because we don't know. Change is scary, and it's hard to say, you know, when you don't know what's on the other side of the curtain. You want to open the curtain, you want to look under, you want to peek under, but when you do peek under and it looks just a little different, nope, not going to work for me. And that's when the fear gets into your head and starts, you know, playing like ninja mind tricks on you, right? And you're like, no, don't go over there, stay over here where it's warm and comfortable, and you're miserable and not reaching your full potential. So I think that that's part of it as well, is, you know, as humans, I mean, we're resistant to change because we don't know what's on the other side, and it's more comfortable being in the discomfort rather than finding something new. So I think that has a lot to do with it. Us humans, we're pretty tricky and complex, right? So I think that has a lot to do. And I also wanted to mention about the unclear objectives and vision. So someone who is neurodiverse, I ask questions. I ask you so many questions that if you were my leader, you probably might be a little annoyed, right? Well, I'm asking because I need to know how I fit in. How is this how is this change going to affect me? That's what I want to know. And once I know that it's going to affect me in a positive way and not negative, that it's going to, make my life easier, I'm going to be more apt to buy in to the change. But if you don't explain that to me, and if you just say, we're doing these changes because we're doing these changes, well, you're going to need to try a little harder to get me on board. So I think, and that's just the fact, right? I need to know the details. So much so I know how to move forward, and I can move forward confidently.
Yes.
Well,
and I think leaders, there's that old saying, just remember everybody's tuned into that radio station, WIIFM, what's in it for me? And that's really important to remember, right? What's in it for me? What's in it for me? And make sure there's something in it for them too, right? If they can understand the picture and how this is all going to come together. And I know we've already talked about this, but I've put it in its own slide because to me, this is really, I believe from my experience, the largest reason that we face barriers to change is that we're not setting a great example sometimes as leaders on how to navigate change. We get into that executive boardroom, and instead of seeing a team of peers that we can all help and communicate with each other, where they're defending what our department's doing, we're fighting for budget money and resources. We're fighting for attention from our CEOs. We're all working like we're trying to battle for the glory of our teams, rather than this is a table that we now need to work together at, because what we do here is what sets the example for everybody else. And I don't know if you've ever experienced this, where maybe you've worked for a large organization and you find out that your boss really dislikes a different manager of a completely different area. And even if you don't even know them, how quickly you start to trust your boss's assumptions. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh yeah. And then also like this is like this little army against that other boss in that department. And it creates, again, these silos, right? About like, they're just never going to get us. We're not blah, blah, blah. And we really need to work together. Individuals that are leaders need to stop focusing so much on individual areas and start looking at win-win situations. Yeah, my department's going to win, but so are all of us. What do you guys?
I love that so much, because I really do come from the school of thought that if I lift you up, I'm also lifting myself up.
Yeah.
And why would we not want that? Why would we not want to work within an organization where everyone has that thought process that what's good for Chrissy is also good for Dee? And it's also good for Jacqueline, and it's also good for everyone else. So I think that really bring humanity into the workplace and take the politics out of the workplace, and just remember that if we're in the same organization, we should have a shared mission, and that shared mission should make it so we're all going to push each other across the finish line. I'm not going to leave you guys behind and say, hey, good day. No, come with me. Let's come together. And that's the difference between a successful organization and an unsuccessful organization in my book.
Mm-hmm. Yes. I'm going to move on. We got 15 minutes left, and we got to get to the good news. So the good news is, how do we make transformation? Well, first thing is you really need to see where you're at. And what I honestly believe is, if you have a team already, I would bet you, my firstborn child, that there is already somebody on your team that can help you that is being underutilized. Because sometimes we shortchange our people, or we don't want to burden them with more responsibility or whatever it is. But really look at who's on your team, what they bring to the table, and utilize them, right? And then you may need to bring in an external expertise. And that's why there are consultants like us around, because this is what we actually specialize in. When people ask me what we do, I'm like, I get messy. with you. You know, the messy things that happen at work that you don't like doing with your people, or when you have to make change and it gets really murky and mucky and people are, you know, discombobulated, like Jacqueline says. I'm the one that gets in there and helps you navigate it in the way that makes sense for you. That's what we do. We get messy with you. And sometimes you need someone external to handle that mess because we have less emotion around it, if that makes sense, because it doesn't personally affect us, although we do empathize, but we can help you navigate and see things that maybe are a little hard to see at the time. Jacqueline, when we talk about those executive teams, and I think this is where this really falls in, be the circuit breaker. It's almost like you're the one that's breaking the curse of generational trauma, right?
Yeah. I think there's so much out there at the minute, you know, when we start to look at the understanding of the difference between fitting in and belonging, the difference between what happens when you've got a team that are competitive versus a team that are collaborative. And I think that's the part, isn't it? When again, I'm going to come back to what you said, because it really struck me, the reactive versus the responsive. You know, what you guys have shared in all of your examples of organizations where they've taken the time to think things through. You know, I'll use the word that I know you've used previously, Chrissy, of pausing. You know, pause and assess. And actually that circuit breaker, it takes that brave person who, you know, is the one, like you guys were just saying, that said the red light, no, actually, I'm not okay. You know, and it's often in the UK, it's that put your head above the parapet, you know, so you're kind of taking a risk, but being that person, the one that shows that bit of vulnerability, because that's a word I would like to share today, is, and I think that's, as a leader, vulnerability is important, you know, showing that you're not perfect. That's the bit, isn't it? That's like, actually, I'll share where I recognize where change needed for me and what needed to be different. And what I can say here, guys, is it's not working. So I think it feels risky, but actually that's the courage. The courage that even when it's scary, do it anyway. Yes,
do it anyways. Yes. And Dee, you already, I think, talked about this curiosity and asking questions piece, right? We shouldn't be annoyed when people ask us questions. We should be excited that they're curious enough, because if they're curious, they're engaged. If they didn't care, they wouldn't be asking questions. So even if it's a bad time to talk, or you're in the middle of a million other things, which is when my kids tend to ask questions, for sure, they wait to the least convenient opportunity to ask a very deep existential question.
They do that, don't they?
Yeah, they do. But I want to learn to spot the clues early on, I think, is really a big deal when it comes to whether or not we can handle transformational change, right? Like, are people holding meetings after meetings, right? They're having that secret meeting with their friend, you know, in the lunchroom by the water cooler. Like that would be an example of a clue that things may not be as agile or flexible as they are. What are some other clues that you've seen with organizations that might want to look at to be like, oh, we really need to look at our transformational process or our change management procedures?
Yeah, I would say just honestly listen to the conversations between your people. Like, I had a manager once tell me, I was a brand new employee. I came in with a smile on my face, ready to conquer the world. And they said, "You're entirely way too perky today. You cannot talk to me until I'm done with my coffee." So, and I laugh about, I kind of stuck back and I was like, well, crap. Okay. Well, I guess I'm just going to take my perky self over here then, and it really, and I laugh about it now and I'm like, wow, that was really funny, but maybe I took it that way. But what if it was an employee that was very introverted, that took that and was then in tears in the bathroom? So listen to the way that your people talk to one another. That is going to probably bring you up quite a bit of red flags once you see and really empathize with the person. And I would also say that if you have somebody who, as a leader, if you have somebody that just grates your nerves, someone on your team that they do such a good job, but man, like you just can't connect with them. That is right there is your personal growth. Find that person, talk to that person, get to know that person, figure out, what's their deal, what's their story. Instead of making up the story, find it out and you probably realize that maybe they don't feel psychologically safe. Maybe they're not reaching their full capacity because maybe no one's ever had a conversation with them about how they can reach their full capacity. So really for me, it all comes down to conversations. It comes down to getting to know each other and being, like as Jacqueline said, being vulnerable with one another as well. Because that's when the trust is going to come out. That's when the truth will come out with the red flags.
Yes. I love it. One of the things that you said there about, what if you say things the wrong way and someone has an emotional response? I think about some people like, oh, everyone's just too sensitive nowadays, or people are too sensitive. And I think sensitivity actually is something to celebrate. We think about instruments like detecting carbon monoxide or a fire alarm or earthquakes. Being sensitive in those situations is the advantage. And I think with people, if we have people that are sensitive, they can actually help you find the things that could definitely become much bigger problems, because they're going to notice it first. And it may seem small when it's them because they're sensitive, but then when it starts happening over and over again, and the death by 1,000 cuts starts happening, and all of a sudden, it's not that, oh, today all of a sudden this situation has irritated me beyond control. It's usually over a buildup. So why not celebrate sensitivity in people like we do in measuring instruments?
I love that. That's a good example.
I do. It's fab. Absolutely fab.
Yeah, so we do that by being transparent, communicating, collaborating, commitment, involvement, accountability, encouragement, and flexibility. And which is all the things that we've talked about. These are the things that you do in the mess, right? Like when you lean on encouragement, when you lean on accountability. And I just like to say accountability, real accountability in an organization looks like mutual respect in the way that if you succeed, your peers and your managers are part of that success. And if you fail, they're also part of that failure. No one can hide from it. Everyone relies on each other. Everyone plays a role. And that's where we talk about that hive. I know we're starting to run out of time, but is there anything in particular out of here setting the stage that you've seen extremely beneficial in your practices?
So I will just say flexibility and really being like water, right? Flow with it, with the changes, flow with what's happening. When you have an issue in front of you, go move around the issue, figure out the issue, rather than just handling it with like, let's just slap next to it. No, let's figure it out and let's move around it. And the barrier then becomes part of who we are, because it shows that we've gone over the barrier and we've moved beyond the barrier. That's my little tidbit for this one.
Love it. Love it. Jeff?
I think, and I mean, to add to Dee's, I think for me, it is the collaboration. It is what we've been talking about, that, this isn't a competition with a vision, a single vision, and, a mission that we're on together. Actually, your colleague doing well is you doing well when you're having that collaboration together. And I wanted just to say something about communication, because, as Dee rightly said, how we speak to each other is ever so important. How we speak to ourselves is ever so important. I've had a conversation this morning about, positive language and the way in which we work, and reframing things. That's such a key part in moving forward as an organization. How do we look at reframing what happened? That accountability, as you rightly say, and actually being able to take the lessons and the opportunities. So for me, it's interesting when you said what is it? I was like, these are like a jigsaw. They fit beautifully in together. That's the bigger picture that works. You know, it's each of these that come together, isn't it? That just makes a difference in that sense. But yeah, collaboration, I'd like to just touch on, like, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. And when we talk about the Hive, this slide, which will be in your toolkits as well, this whole presentation will be, is really explains how the Hive works. And it really is about being ready for transformation. And it's looking at what are the needs we need in each of these stages of, you know, forming, storming, norming, and then we're high performing. I love all those rhyming words. This is what we do. This is what we teach. And it really takes each of those key areas and it plugs them into action, outcomes, and how to assess where we're at, right? It's some of these things when we talk about collaboration or relationships, sometimes they can be hard to quantify or measure, but that is also something that we can help with. One of the things in the toolkit that we're going to be including for you is a bit of a work sheet, workbook. It's a vision exercise that you can do with your people or your executive teams before you embark on a mission. But really it is establishing, when we talk about when we're making transformation, the way to do that is to really understand where we're at, because sometimes we think we're somewhere, but we're actually here. So it's really getting the coordinates of where we're actually sitting, taking inventory of where we are and understanding our current state, reflecting on what's good, because it's not like we need to be ashamed or attach a negativity to the things that we've done with, because we've done things the best way that we knew how with the time, resources, and experience that we had. So we can reflect on what is good and the things that we want to keep. But then we need to also acknowledge, okay, so if we stayed here, if we stayed and did not change a thing, how will this affect us down the road? And often you will see, if I stay here, this is going to hurt more down the road. So it really makes, we talk about what's the word? Some people only change when it gets uncomfortable enough, right? Like once the pain of staying where you are is too great, that's when you'll finally change. And this is sort of creating that feeling, that situation, that assessment in a safe environment. And then having everybody participate in, okay, so what if we took everybody and we started to work towards getting there instead? What could that look like once we get there? And then it becomes from pain to hope. And then you can take the steps to plan collectively from your current state to the desired destination. And that's really how you create movement as a leader. It's one of my favorite exercises to do with executive teams. I've even done it with small groups like safety committees. It is just such a fun, safe, great exercise to get people excited about possibilities, but also, you know, give themselves a pat on the back for what they're doing now.
I've got to say, I was giggling as you were saying it, because for me, it's also individuals. I love that. You know, friends of mine that wanted to go and run a race and actually kept not doing it. So, you know, this whole process is just incredible for getting someone to, you know, really accept where they're at, that honesty, to then enable them once they've accepted that, because, you know, there it is, it's that acceptance of where we are right now, and being able to see what we're doing really well and actually what needs to change, which allows us to dream. And I come back to what we said earlier, what's the place we're doing it from? We take people from fear into that place of love, you know, where actually change happens and transformation happens. So yeah.
Yes, I love this too, because it's a we thing. It's not a,
yeah,
I believe about, no, it's we are going on a journey together.
Yeah.
And Dee, what would you like, if you had some last thoughts to share with our beautiful audience before we wrap up? What might you like to share as our newest member of Ignite Purpose?
Oh, well, so I'm just really excited to be here. Really excited to be, you know, at this party, with these folks. So, yeah, so I would say, just if you ever have a doubt, for the viewers, if if anything that we're talking about resonates with you or anything like that. I mean, you have 3 individuals here that would love to, have just a conversation with you and just figure out how, we can help you get, from here to there. And I really also want to just preference what you said, Chrissy, about turning pain into hope. And I just want to say how profound that is, because what keeps us from transforming is the pain, is the no sign of hope, is fear. So when we replace those negative actions with positive ones, such as hope, your conversations are going to be a lot different with your people as well. So, yeah. And if you ever need help, we're all here for you.
Beautiful. Thank you. And just actually what you said. So the other thing, part of that vision collaboration worksheet that we're going to provide you. The other thing too is a mental fitness self-sabotage assessment, because as Dee and Jacqueline talked about fear, one of the things we do is we engage these protective mechanisms called saboteurs, which we actually think are protecting us, but they tend to disconnect us from others and create barriers for us to engage and grow together in and to create connection. So we're going to do, one of the things we're going to offer you as well is an assessment, so you can find out sort of what are your most common self-protection mechanisms that you have been ingrained within you, and then provide a little bit of a debrief on how they work, how you can get to understand them, and some of the ways you can help calm their voices down to assure them that you are safe, so that you can create great change, great transformation, and connection and engagement with your people. Been good?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right on.
Yeah.
Good stuff. Well, thank you so much for being here. We will send out the recording and the toolkit before the end of the week. And if you have any suggestions for future webinar topics, please let us know. We'd love to do these at least once a month, just to share information and just let people know that, we're here to help. And if there's any way we can serve you, please just let us know. Have a great day. Thanks, Dee and Jacqueline.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Chrissy and Dee.
Thank
Great
you.
to work with you.
Yes, this is awesome.